This very second, your mind is processing. Do you know what all it's processing? It's processing this second what you took for breakfast this morning in millions of cells going all the way around. It's processing the exact neuroregulation of every endocrine hormone in your body this second. Yes? It's processing that molecule of water that you drank this morning and what's going to go through with it. It's processing you sitting right now on this chair. It's processing this darkness, these lights, every single thing. Believe me, it's happening. Yes or no? Your mind can handle, and you are making a decision. Every second, a decision is going on. The decision whether you're sitting this way or that way, whether you want your jacket on or off, everything, decision is happening right now this second. That's the 15,000 decisions a second. Okay? Your nose. Just look, I'm not even gone below this. Your nose can smell up to 10,000 different odors. Your touch can detect an item 1/25,000th of an inch thickness. That's how beautifully just the tip of your index finger is. How sensitively God has made you. Your tongue can taste 1 part of quinine in 2 million parts of water. Quinine is one of the most bitter, and acutely horrible on the tongue. If you dilute it into 20 million parts of water, that means 1/1,000,000th of a drop, your tongue will pick it up. That's how sensitively you have been created. You are an incredible bundle of abilities. That's what you are. And this is notwithstanding all the other talent I've been seeing inside this room this morning. I was watching all of y'all dancing, moving, and I was saying, God, what a wonder. You know, if we didn't have our backbone, I could pick you up and I'll drop you, you'll go down like that. That's how beautifully we are created. We have all this wonder. You are an absolute masterpiece. And that's one of the things I want you to understand, the biggest deception and blindfold we have mentally. And the biggest reason we have such a lot of anxious distress and pain in our lives is because we have never recognized. I'm not talking about now I only mentioned physical, anatomical aspects, but I'm talking about the entire person that you are, that God created you to be His masterpiece. And that's each one of us here. There's not one person here who's not His masterpiece. Incredibly, no two of us are identical. Even if you have an identical twin, for us, as medical people, you are not identical at all. He custom made you. Even your identical twin is not yours. Your parents may not have planned you, but God did. Long before you were conceived by your parents, you were conceived in the heart of God. I want you to just think for a second, because every day, in my work as a psychiatrist, you know, one of the questions we even have in our usual format, you know, when you ask what medical conditions you have, et cetera, allergies, it's part of our, there's a whole format we have to get history about. One of the things we ask about is whether this was a planned or an unplanned pregnancy, because we know that often these things can impact the developing fetus. The actual baby before even it's born. Long before you were conceived by your parents, you were conceived in the heart of God. And for a second, I just want you to close your eyes and think of that. Your parents may or may not have wanted you. Litty was talking about being the 10th and not being wanted around. Each one of us may have been the first or whatever, but it might have been a moment of real struggles for our parents, and even in their most lovingness, kindness, they may have not particularly wanted us at that time, and may have impacted us in ways we may not understand. But remember, Satan gets us hooked onto that thought rather than onto the truth is that you were wanted by God. You were conceived the very moment, not a moment before, not a moment after, by God. It was not your parents who decided it. It was He. who knitted you in your mother's womb. Okay, let's get back. And each of us was created to be Christ's beloved. I mean, this was, I remember in God's image, a bundle of love. When I was in year 11, 12, I was going through that phase where, nothing your parents say makes sense to you. Everything your parents say, you want to say no. It was one of those periods where I couldn't understand myself, and my mother couldn't understand me. And she brought us up as a single mother because my dad died in a train accident when I was in standard 2. And I remember from a very happy, loving, we were a very happy family, and then all of a sudden, it was like all we knew was Mom was in tears, Mom was down, there was no father, there was no laughter, no more going out of the house. As my brother and I, he was a year younger, we were just stuck at home. And I just couldn't understand what had happened. And for a long time I thought because we were so small, 7 years and 6 years old, and we kept saying, where's daddy, where's daddy, where's daddy? All mommy could say was, daddy has gone to be with Jesus. And in some way, as I kept growing up, it was very comforting initially, but after that, I felt as if he was responsible for the way our family and our struggles and our pain and what we were going through. And at one point in time, my brother, who was once in standard 3, he had a little fight with another classmate of his. And as we met in some public place with the parents of that boy. They were Malayalis as well. And they turned around, they said, you look after your son. They were telling my mother. I was standing there holding her hand as well and listening to all this. You look after your son, okay? Don't get him to touch our son. After all, they are children without a father, okay? So they said it in the word they use in Malayalam, Tande illatta pillera. And it was sort of really painful. I started growing up feeling something's quite deficient. There's something not quite right with us. There's something wrong with us because we don't have a father. And I just started getting really estranged. I grew up in a school where if you looked around, everybody would have thought I was one of those ideal students, became the school president, was involved in sport, drama, activity, everything. And yet, I think that was just, there were times I'd get into my room and just rub my cheeks because the plastic smile was getting too stressful for me. When I came into standard 11, and there was this adolescent period of tiff and fight with each other, I thought, I have to somehow get away from my mom. It's just too claustrophobic. But as you know, in year 11 and 12, there's not much you can do. And once a nun comes along and she says, I'm actually going to Patna for a retreat. So this is in North India. And I thought, what a chance. I can get out of the house because she's a nun. My mom will allow me. I can get away. My whole purpose is get away from the house. And I said, Mom, I want to go for a retreat. And she thought, my daughter will get better when she comes back. Let her go for a retreat. And I went there, and I was the only young person. It was a retreat for nuns, priests, and there were about 3-4 older couples in their 40s and 50s. So I spent my time watching around to see who's sleeping, who's nodding, who's doing what in the retreat. I couldn't concentrate, and I felt out of place. And at one point, on the second last day of the retreat, I just thought, my mother spent a lot of money, the train fare and everything for this overnight journey and the fees for coming to the retreat. I felt really guilty all of a sudden. And I sat in the chapel, just like there's a chapel here. I just went to the chapel. Nobody was there. I just sat there. And I felt very empty, and I thought I was rock bottom. And suddenly I thought, God, if you are there, speak to me. If you are real, are you real? And there was a Bible somebody had left there after their prayer time. I happened to pull it. I opened a part, and I never even knew such a thing existed in the Bible. It was the book of wisdom. And at that minute, there was a verse there that said, and he looks after his beloved, even though they do not understand why he called some of his elect away early. It might sound like a very ordinary sentence, but to me it was a custom-made sentence because God looked into the deepest despair on the areas of questions I had. For someone else, that may have meant nothing. Can you see what I mean? He really gets to your need. And that was the first turning point in my life. For those years, that the year Daddy died when I was in standard 2, till this particular moment in standard 12, I had never cried. It was like my tear cells had stopped. And I had a lump always in my throat. Now, as a psychiatrist, I understand that these are reactions of unresolved grief in children, which I didn't understand at the time.